I'm Morgan, 32, and I built my life from scratch after growing up with a mother who always chose my brother over me. Last Tuesday, I was celebrating my promotion at home with a glass of wine when my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening the door revealed my mother Linda and brother Jason standing there with those familiar fake smiles that always preceded asking for something. Mom immediately looked past me at my living room. "Well, look at this nice neighborhood. Seems like someone's doing very well for herself." My stomach dropped as I recognized that calculating tone. If you've ever felt that sense of dread when family shows up unannounced, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this wild story unfolds. Growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania wasn't easy for me. Our modest 3-bedroom house always felt divided. One side for my younger brother Jason and my mother, and the other side for me. My mother Linda was the queen of manipulation, a master at making me feel like I should be grateful for the bare minimum, while Jason received everything he wanted. Jason is 3 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, it was clear who the favorite was. He received new clothes while I got hand-me-downs from cousins. He got the newest video game systems while I saved up babysitting money for months to buy books. The inequality wasn't subtle. It was a daily reminder that I somehow mattered less. When I was 8, my dad finally had enough of my mother's behavior and left. I remember him kneeling down, tears in his eyes, promising he'd still see me often. Those visits grew less frequent as my mother made them increasingly difficult. And by the time I was 12, he had moved to Arizona with a new family. I don't blame him for leaving. But being the one left behind with Linda and Jason was like being abandoned on a sinking ship. By 14, I had essentially become my own parent. I'd wake up early to make my own breakfast while Mom slept in. She'd be up in time to make Jason's favorite breakfast before school, though. I still remember the sound of them laughing in the kitchen while I quietly got myself ready upstairs. After school, I'd walk to the local grocery store where I worked stocking shelves until closing. Mom never once picked me up, even in the winter when it was dark and freezing by the time my shift ended. Meanwhile, Jason never had to work. "He needs to focus on sports," Mom would say, even though he usually just played video games. "You're the responsible one," she'd tell me, as if that explained why I had to earn money for my school supplies while she bought Jason expensive sneakers. When I needed a laptop for school assignments, Mom told me the family couldn't afford it. 2 weeks later, she bought Jason a gaming computer because he seemed bored. I took on a second weekend job at a local diner and bought my own laptop 6 months later. That pattern repeated itself through high school. I needed something, was told we couldn't afford it, then watched as Jason received something even more expensive. By 18, I had saved enough from my multiple jobs to put myself through community college. I lived at home to save money, which meant 2 more years of watching the disparity between how my mother treated us. I'd come home exhausted from classes and work to find my clean laundry dumped on my bed because Mom needed the basket for Jason's clothes, which she still washed, dried, and folded for him. During my second year at community college, I maintained a perfect 4 gigapascals while working 30 hours a week. My academic advisor helped me apply for scholarships, and I was awarded a full ride to complete my bachelor's degree at Pennsylvania State University. The day I received the acceptance letter was one of the happiest of my life. I ran home to share the news, only to find Mom and Jason packing for a weekend trip to New York that I hadn't been told about. "That's nice, honey," Mom said without looking up from her suitcase when I told her about the scholarship. "Can you feed the cat while we're gone? We're celebrating Jason making the intramural soccer team." Moving to Penn State was my first taste of true freedom. I studied accounting and finance, throwing myself into my education with the same intensity I'd applied to surviving my childhood. I graduated with honors, though neither Mom nor Jason attended the ceremony. They were on a cruise that week, a graduation gift for Jason, who had barely passed his community college classes. My first job after college was an entry-level position at a financial services firm in Philadelphia. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it was more money than I'd ever had. I rented a tiny studio apartment and experienced what it was like to buy groceries without counting every penny. For the first time, I could purchase something simply because I wanted it, not because it was the absolute cheapest option. Over the next 8 years, I methodically built my career. I earned my CPA certification, changed companies twice for better opportunities, and eventually moved into corporate finance within the tech industry. Each move came with more responsibility and higher compensation. I developed a reputation for solving complex problems and managing difficult projects successfully. 3 years ago, I accepted a position with a growing tech company in Seattle. The relocation across the country felt symbolic, putting physical distance between myself and my past. I started as a senior financial analyst and was promoted to finance manager within 18 months. Throughout these years, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I called on major holidays and birthdays, sent generic gifts for Christmas, and exchanged occasional text messages with my mother. The conversations were always superficial, with Mom doing most of the talking about local gossip or Jason's latest almost breakthrough opportunity. She never asked detailed questions about my life, and I never volunteered information. As far as my mother knew, I had a decent job that paid the bills. I never discussed my salary, promotions, or career trajectory. She assumed I lived in a small apartment because that's what I could afford. In reality, I had been steadily advancing and saving. My investment portfolio had grown substantially, and I lived below my means out of habit. Last month, my hard work culminated in a promotion to Director of Financial Planning and Analysis. The new position came with double my previous salary, $220,000 a year, plus bonuses and stock options. After years of renting, I finally felt secure enough to buy a home. Nothing extravagant, but a lovely 3-bedroom house in a peaceful Seattle neighborhood with good schools and parks nearby. Though I lived alone, I wanted the extra space for a home office and guest room for the few close friends I'd made over the years. I had been living in my new house for just 2 weeks when my carefully separated worlds collided. The promotion announcement had been posted on LinkedIn by my company, and though I kept my social media presence minimal, the corporate communications team had included me in their public congratulations post. I hadn't thought much about it until my doorbell rang that Tuesday evening. "Well, aren't you going to invite us in?" Mom asked after her pointed comment about my neighborhood. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she gestured to the luggage behind them. 2 large suitcases and a duffel bag sat on my porch, a clear indication this wasn't planned as a short visit. I stepped aside mechanically, my mind racing as they entered my home. Jason immediately dropped his backpack on my entryway bench and whistled. "Nice place, sis. Much better than that dump you showed us pictures of last year." He was referring to my apartment, which had actually been quite nice, but photographed modestly, for the exact purpose of not showcasing my financial situation. "What a surprise," I managed to say, closing the door behind them. "I wish you'd called first. I could have prepared. We wanted to surprise you." Mom's voice had that artificial cheeriness I recognized from childhood, the tone she used when she was about to ask for something significant. "Jason, take our bags to the guest room while I catch up with your sister." Jason grumbled but grabbed their suitcases. "Which way?" I hesitated before pointing down the hallway. "Second door on the right." "But wait, I don't understand. How long are you planning to stay?" Mom waved her hand dismissively and moved into my living room, examining my furnishings with a critical eye. "Oh, we'll figure that out. My goodness, is this a real leather sofa? Must have cost a fortune." She ran her hand along the back of my couch, which I'd purchased secondhand and reupholstered myself. "It's not. How did you even know where I live?" I don't remember sharing my new address. I followed her, watching as she picked up and examined each decorative item on my coffee table. "Oh, Morgan, don't be so suspicious. Sheila Thompson's daughter saw your promotion announcement online. You know Sheila from the hair salon? Her daughter works at some tech company too, and she recognized yours. She mentioned to Sheila what those director positions usually pay, and Sheila told me." Mom set down the small crystal paperweight I'd bought to celebrate my first bonus. "You never told us you were doing so well for yourself." Before I could respond, Jason returned from the guest room and headed straight for my kitchen. I heard my refrigerator door open and the clink of bottles as he rummaged through it without asking. "Hey, where's the good stuff?" he called out. "All you have is this healthy crap and some cheap beer." Mom gave me a look that simultaneously conveyed disappointment in my hospitality and expectation that I would remedy the situation immediately. It was a look I knew well from childhood. I wasn't expecting guests. I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. We can order takeout if you're hungry. That would be nice, Mom said, settling onto my couch like she owned it. After our long trip, a good meal would be appreciated. Jason, come sit down and let your sister take care of dinner. Jason returned with one of my craft beers and sprawled in my reading chair, putting his feet up on my ottoman without removing his shoes. At 39, he still had the entitlement of a teenager. His once athletic build now softened by years of minimal effort and maximum indulgence. As I ordered food from a nearby Thai restaurant, I noticed Mom studying my smartwatch, the framed professional certificate on my wall, and the quality of my dining room table. She was taking inventory, calculating my worth. So, she finally said when I put my phone down, "Director of Financial Planning. That sounds important. You must be doing very well for yourself." "I'm comfortable," I answered cautiously. "And yet you never thought to mention this promotion to your family? Or the one before that? Or that you bought a house?" Her voice took on the wounded tone that had so often made me feel guilty as a child. I had to hear about my own daughter's success from Sheila Thompson, of all people. "We don't really talk about work when we catch up," I said, which was true. Our brief phone calls usually consisted of her talking about herself and Jason, rarely asking about my life. "Well, I'm hurt, Morgan. After all, I sacrificed for you growing up to be kept in the dark about your life like this." She placed her hand over her heart dramatically. Single-handedly raising 2 children wasn't easy, you know. Jason snorted in agreement. "Yeah, and meanwhile, I'm stuck in a crappy studio apartment while you're living it up in this nice house. Family is supposed to share good fortune, you know." The doorbell rang, providing a momentary reprieve from their thinly veiled accusations. I paid for the food and set it out on the dining table, watching as Jason piled his plate high with the most expensive dishes I'd ordered. Throughout dinner, Mom skillfully extracted information about my job, salary range, and financial situation through a combination of direct questions and guilt-inducing statements about family loyalty. Jason mainly complained about his own life, his latest dead-end job that he'd already grown tired of, his landlord who unreasonably expected rent on time, and the unfairness of his car breaking down after only 6 years. By the time we finished eating, it was clear they hadn't come just to congratulate me. Their every comment was designed to establish that I was doing well and they were struggling, creating an implied obligation. "Well," I said, clearing the plates and checking my watch, "I have an early meeting tomorrow, so I should probably get to bed soon." "Oh, we're jet-lagged anyway," Mom said. "We'll get settled in the guest room. Is there another blanket?" Jason tosses and turns so much. I froze in the act of loading my dishwasher. "You're both staying in the guest room?" "Well, of course. Unless you have another bedroom you haven't mentioned." Mom raised an eyebrow. "I have my office, but there's no bed. Just a day bed that's too small for Jason." I hesitated. I thought maybe Jason would take the couch. "Don't be ridiculous, Morgan. We can share a room for a while. It's not like it's the first time." Mom's use of "a while" instead of specifying their departure date sent alarm bells ringing in my head. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom, listening to Jason's loud snoring through the wall, and wondering how I'd let this happen. I was an adult, financially independent, with a successful career. Yet within hours of their arrival, I'd fallen back into old patterns, accommodating their demands and swallowing my objections. I remembered a similar situation from when I was 16. I'd saved $120 for a school trip, keeping the cash hidden in a book in my room. When the permission slip needed to be turned in along with the payment, the money was mysteriously missing. Mom claimed ignorance, but that weekend, Jason had a brand new pair of sneakers. When I confronted them, Mom said family needs came first, and Jason's old shoes had holes. I missed the trip and worked additional shifts to replace the money, which I then kept in a locked box at my friend Rachel's house. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I promised myself I wouldn't be 16 again. This time, I would maintain my boundaries no matter what. I woke up early the next morning, hoping to leave for work before my unexpected guests stirred. No such luck. Mom was already in my kitchen, going through my cabinets and refrigerator with a disapproving expression. "There's hardly anything to eat in this house," she commented as I entered. "And your coffee is that expensive brand. You always did have expensive tastes. The irony of her statement, after years of denying me basics while indulging Jason, wasn't lost on me, but I chose not to engage. I usually grab breakfast near the office, I explained, pouring myself coffee. There's a grocery store 2 blocks down if you need anything specific. We can't be expected to go grocery shopping when we don't know the area, she replied. Maybe you could pick up some things after work? Jason likes those frozen breakfast sandwiches, and I need my special creamer. I nodded noncommittally and grabbed my laptop bag. I should be home around 6. Make yourselves comfortable, but please don't go into my office. I have work documents in there. As I reached for my keys on the hook by the door, Mom followed me. You know, it would be easier if we had a key. That way we wouldn't be stuck waiting for you if we want to go out. A key. The presumption that they would be staying long enough to need one sent a chill down my spine. Let's talk about that later. I'm going to be late. I practically ran to my car, the tension in my shoulders only releasing once I was several blocks away. Work had always been my sanctuary, the place where my competence was valued and my boundaries respected. Today, it felt even more like a refuge. That sense of peace was short-lived. By mid-morning, the text started. 10:17 a.m. Mom. There's nothing for lunch here. Do you expect us to starve? 10:42 a.m. Jason. What's your Wi-Fi password? The TV is boring. 11:30 a.m. Mom. We need to have a family meeting tonight. Important matters to discuss. I responded minimally, providing the Wi-Fi password but ignoring the comments about food and the ominous family meeting. During my lunch break, I called Rachel, my best friend since college and one of the few people who truly understood my family dynamics. They just showed up, without calling first? Rachel's outrage was comforting. And they expect to stay in your guest room together? For how long? They haven't said, I replied, picking at my salad. But they asked for a key. Oh, hell no, Rachel said firmly. Morgan, you need to set boundaries right now before this gets out of hand. I know, I sighed. But it's hard. As soon as they start with the guilt trips about how much they sacrificed for me, which is complete bullshit, and you know it, Rachel interrupted. You practically raised yourself while your mom waited on Jason hand and foot. Don't let them rewrite history. After we hung up, I tried to focus on my work, but my concentration was shattered. The family meeting comment kept replaying in my mind. What exactly were they planning? When I arrived home that evening, the answer became immediately apparent. My neat living room looked like a tornado had hit it. Food containers littered the coffee table, couch cushions were askew, and several of my books had been removed from the shelves and left open on various surfaces. More concerning was the slightly ajar door to my home office, the one room I'd specifically asked them to avoid. A quick glance inside confirmed my fears. The drawers of my desk had been opened, though nothing appeared to be missing. Mom and Jason were sitting in the living room, an expectant air about them that reminded me of predators waiting for their prey. They had cleared just enough space on the coffee table for a yellow legal pad covered in Mom's handwriting. Morgan, good, you're home, Mom said, not bothering to get up. We need to talk about some family plans we've made. Family plans? I echoed, still standing in the entryway, unwilling to step further into what felt like a trap. What kind of plans? Jason smirked, taking a swig from another of my craft beers. The kind where you finally help out your family. Mom shot him a warning look, not for the sentiment, but for the bluntness, before turning back to me with a practiced, sympathetic expression. Sweetheart, I've been thinking a lot about our future as a family. Jason and I have been struggling so much lately, and here you are, doing so well for yourself. I finally moved into the living room, deliberately sitting in the armchair furthest from them. What exactly are you suggesting? She picked up the legal pad, a triumphant gleam in her eye. I've given notice at my job. After 30 years of working for that ungrateful company, I deserve to retire. You're only 57, I pointed out. That's not retirement age. Early retirement, she corrected. And Jason has had such bad luck with employment recently. I got fired again, Jason interjected casually, as if announcing the weather. 3rd time this year. Not my fault, though. Manager had it in for me. Mom nodded sympathetically before continuing. So we've come up with a perfect solution. We're moving to Seattle. The room seemed to spin momentarily as the implications hit me. Moving here? To Seattle? Yes. Isn't it wonderful? We'll be close to you, and you can help us get on our feet. She handed me the legal pad with a flourish. I've worked it all out. The page contained what she'd titled Family Support Plan. It outlined a monthly contribution from me of $5,000, split between them for housing, food, and necessities. There were additional notations for health insurance costs, car payments, and various other expenses she expected me to cover. Mom, this is. I struggled to find words that wouldn't immediately ignite a confrontation. It's only fair. She finished for me. After all we've done for you. And Jason needs a fresh start. You could help him get a job at your company. Jason nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, nothing fancy. Just something in management to start. I'm thinking 6 figures. Minimal responsibility. The audacity left me momentarily speechless. Jason had never held a job for more than 8 months. His resume was a graveyard of. It wasn't my fault departures, and they didn't appreciate me resignations. That's not how corporate hiring works, I finally managed. I can't just get you a management job with no qualifications. His face darkened. So, you think I'm not qualified? That's rich coming from my little sister. I didn't say that. I backpedaled automatically. The peacekeeper role I'd adopted in childhood resurfacing. But there are procedures, requirements, details, Mom waved dismissively. You're a director now. You must have influence. The important thing is that we'll be living here now, as a family. Living here? In Seattle, you mean? I asked, hoping against hope that's what she meant. Well, here in your house for now, she clarified, confirming my worst fears. Until we get on our feet. With your support, of course. The rest of the evening was a blur of attempts to reason with them. I suggested helping them find affordable housing back in Pennsylvania. I offered to look over Jason's resume and provide job search advice. I even proposed a one-time gift to help Mom transition to a less demanding job rather than quitting entirely. Each suggestion was met with variations of the same response. It wasn't enough. I wasn't being generous. I owed them more after everything they'd done for me. 1 week. I finally said firmly as the clock approached midnight. You can stay here for 1 week while we figure out a more reasonable plan. Mom's face transformed instantly from demanding to wounded. 1 week? To determine our entire future? Morgan, I can't believe how cold you've become. Success has changed you. I'm just trying to be practical, I insisted. We need boundaries. Boundaries? Jason laughed harshly. Listen to Miss Corporate America. We're family. There are no boundaries in family. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me, something I'd never done before in my own home. With shaking hands, I called Rachel again, despite the late hour. They want to move in with me, I whispered, afraid they might be listening at the door. They expect me to support them completely. $5,000 a month, Rachel. And they want to live here indefinitely. Absolutely not, Rachel's voice was steel. Morgan, this is financial abuse. You need to shut this down now before it goes any further. After we hung up, I lay awake for hours, formulating a plan to handle the situation firmly but compassionately. I would help them, but on my terms, not theirs. I would maintain my boundaries while still being generous. I would find the balance that had eluded our family for decades. With that resolution, I finally fell into a restless sleep, unaware that the worst confrontation was yet to come. I called in to work the next morning, explaining I had a family emergency that required my immediate attention. My manager was understanding, having met my mother briefly during a video call when she had accidentally interrupted. When I emerged from my bedroom, I found an even greater disaster than the previous day. Jason had apparently invited friends over, people he'd just met at a local bar, judging by the empty bottles and unfamiliar jacket left behind. The guest room was in disarray, with wet towels on the floor and a mysterious stain on the comforter. More alarmingly, I caught my mother in my office, rifling through my filing cabinet where I kept financial documents. She barely looked embarrassed when I walked in. These investment statements are impressive, she commented, holding up papers from my portfolio. I had no idea you had this much in savings. That changes things. Those are private, I said, taking the documents from her hand and returning them to the file. I specifically asked you not to come in here. She shrugged. I'm your mother. I have a right to know how well my daughter is doing. She patted my cheek condescendingly. I've been calling family to let them know about our situation. Aunt Karen sends her love. What situation? I asked, alarm growing. What have you been telling people? Just that we've come to help you since you've been struggling with the pressures of success, she said smoothly. And that you're being a bit difficult about family support. But we're working on it. My phone had several missed calls from relatives I rarely spoke with. Mom had been busy creating her narrative, positioning herself as the concerned mother and me as the ungrateful daughter. I took a deep breath. We need to talk. Now. All of us. In the living room, I found Jason still asleep on the couch, despite it being nearly noon. I woke him firmly and waited while he grumbled and complained about his hangover. Once they were both seated across from me, I laid out my counteroffer, which I'd carefully considered during my sleepless night. I care about you both, and I want to help within reason, I began. Here's what I can offer. I'll help Jason with his job search, including resume, review, and interview coaching. I won't get him a job at my company, but I can introduce him to some recruiters in fields he's interested in. Jason rolled his eyes, but didn't interrupt. For housing, I'll help you find and pay for a short-term rental here in Seattle. 2 months maximum, while you decide if this is really where you want to be. During that time, I expect Jason to be actively job hunting, and Mom to reconsider whether quitting your job is the best decision. Mom's face hardened with each word, the mask of maternal concern slipping to reveal the calculation beneath. If you decide to stay in Seattle after that trial period, I can provide a reasonable amount of help with a security deposit on an apartment, but ongoing financial support will depend on both of you making efforts to support yourselves. I finished by sliding across a sheet of paper with my terms clearly outlined, including specific dollar amounts that were generous but not extravagant, and definite timeframes to prevent open-ended commitments. The silence that followed lasted only seconds before it was shattered by Mom's cold laugh. "This is insulting," she said, not even picking up the paper. "After everything we've done for you, this is what you offer? 2 months in some cheap apartment and then we're on our own? That's how you repay your family? What exactly have you done for me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, years of repressed feelings finally finding voice. "Mom, you barely took care of me growing up. I worked multiple jobs as a teenager while you gave Jason everything." "How dare you?" she gasped. "I sacrificed everything for you children after your father abandoned us." "He didn't abandon us," I corrected. "He left you and your manipulation. And then you made me the parent in the household while you spoiled Jason rotten." Jason stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Don't blame Mom because you were jealous of me getting what I deserved." "What you deserved?" I repeated incredulously. "What about what I deserved? A parent who showed up to my graduation? Who didn't steal my savings for your new shoes? Who helped me apply for college, instead of making me figure it out alone?" I turned back to Mom, years of carefully maintained composure crumbling. "Do you remember when I had pneumonia senior year and you refused to take me to the doctor because you had tickets to Jason's hockey game? My teacher ended up driving me to the emergency room when I collapsed during class. You were always so dramatic," Mom dismissed. "And look at you now, successful and still complaining about the past." "I'm successful because I worked for it, despite you, not because of you," I said quietly. "I put myself through school. I built my career while you were telling Jason he was too special, to start at the bottom like everyone else." The memories came flooding out. Mom borrowing my first paycheck to buy Jason a new gaming system, her forgetting to pick me up from a late-night school event and then blaming me for not reminding her, the countless times I'd gone without so Jason could have extras. "When I had my wisdom teeth removed, I took the bus home because you were too busy shopping with Jason," I continued, my voice stronger now. "When I needed help with college applications, you told me to figure it out myself while you spent hours helping him with basic homework. When I got my first apartment and asked to borrow your car to move, you said you needed it to take Jason to a movie." Mom's face had gone from angry to a calculating blankness I recognized all too well. It was the expression she wore when shifting tactics. "Morgan, sweetheart, I understand you felt neglected sometimes. But families support each other. Jason has always needed more help than you. You're the strong one, the smart one. We're just asking you to be the bigger person, like you've always been. It was a masterful pivot, acknowledging my feelings just enough to seem reasonable while reframing my independence as a reason I should now support them. Being the strong one doesn't obligate me to financially support two healthy adults indefinitely, I replied. So that's it? Jason interjected. You're gonna hoard all your money and success while your family struggles? Real nice, Morgan. Mom was right. You've become cold and selfish. I'm offering significant help, I pointed to my proposal again. Just not an unlimited blank check. Mom stood up then, her expression hardening. After everything I sacrificed, this is the thanks I get. A daughter who abandons her family when they need her, who thinks she's too good for us now that she has money. I never said. The slap caught me completely by surprise, my mother's hand connecting with my cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side. The room fell silent except for Jason's soft damn that sounded almost impressed. I stood frozen, my hand pressed to my stinging cheek, staring at the woman who had given birth to me but had never truly been a mother to me. In 32 years, she had never struck me before. But somehow this physical crossing of boundaries felt like the natural progression of years of emotional violations. Help us properly, Mom said, her voice steady as if she hadn't just assaulted me. Or, you're not part of this family anymore. I looked from her cold eyes to Jason's smirking face and felt a strange, calm wash over me. I never really was. The silence that followed my words was profound, broken only by the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Mom's expression shifted rapidly between shock, anger, and a calculated attempt to look wounded. What a terrible thing to say, she finally whispered, her voice trembling with what I now recognized as manufactured emotion. After all these years, all I've done for you. I took a step back, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. My cheek still stung, but the pain had clarified something I'd spent years trying to deny. This wasn't love. This had never been love. You need to leave, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Both of you. Today. Jason laughed dismissively. Right. And go, where exactly? There's a Holiday Inn 3 miles from here, I replied. I'll pay for one night while you figure out your next steps. But you cannot stay here. Mom's tactical tears dried up instantly, replaced by cold fury. You would put your own mother out on the street? Your own brother? You're not on the street. You have a home in Pennsylvania. You have jobs, or at least you did until you decided I would be your meal ticket. I moved toward the front door, putting my hand on the knob. Please pack your things. I'll call you a ride to the hotel. Mom stepped toward me, her face transformed by rage. You ungrateful little— Don't, I interrupted, holding up my hand. If you touch me again, I will call the police. This is my home, and I'm asking you to leave. Jason stood up then, his considerable size suddenly feeling threatening as he loomed over me. You think you're so much better than us now, don't you? Little Morgan, with her fancy job and her nice house, too good for her real family. This isn't about being too good for anyone, I replied, struggling to maintain my calm. This is about boundaries and respect, which neither of you seem capable of understanding. Boundaries. Mom spat the word like a curse. Family doesn't have boundaries. Family takes care of each other. That's the thing, Mom. I've been taking care of myself since I was a child because you wouldn't. I'm not starting now with two adults who refuse to be responsible for themselves. Jason moved closer, his face contorted with anger. You know what? Maybe we'll just stay anyway. What are you going to do? Physically throw us out? I'd like to see you try. He gestured around my living room. Maybe I'll help myself to a few things while we're at it. That TV looks expensive. My hand tightened on the doorknob as fear flickered through me. Jason had always had a temper, and though he'd never been physically violent with me before, the look in his eyes made me genuinely concerned. As if sensing my fear, he smirked. Yeah, not so tough now, are you? The sound of another car pulling into my driveway broke the tension momentarily. Through the window, I saw Rachel getting out of her car, followed by my neighbor, Mr. Patterson, a retired police officer I'd befriended when I first moved in. I called for backup, I said, relief flooding through me as I opened the door to let them in. Hey there, Rachel called out with forced cheerfulness as she entered, immediately coming to stand beside me. Just thought I'd drop by to see how the family reunion is going. Mr. Patterson followed, his presence imposing despite being in his 60s. Morgan, everything okay here? Sounded like some raised voices when I was checking my mail. The addition of witnesses changed the dynamic instantly. Mom's face transformed back into the concerned mother act, while Jason took a step back, his threatening posture melting away. "Oh, we're just having a little family disagreement," Mom said sweetly. "You know how it is when children grow up and forget where they came from." Rachel, who had heard countless stories about my childhood over the years, gave Mom a cold smile. Actually, Morgan never forgets where she came from. That's why she's such a generous and compassionate person despite everything. The emphasis on everything was subtle but clear. Rachel knew exactly what everything encompassed. "Morgan has asked you to leave," Rachel continued pleasantly. "As her friend, I'm here to help make sure that happens peacefully. And as a former police officer," Mr. Patterson added, "I'd strongly advise cooperating. Private property laws are pretty clear about when someone can be asked to leave a residence they don't own or legally rent." Mom looked from Rachel to Mr. Patterson, then to me, calculation evident in her eyes as she weighed her options. Jason continued to scowl, but had moved further back into the living room, his earlier bravado diminished by the presence of witnesses. "Fine," Mom finally said, her voice icy. "We'll go to a hotel. For tonight. But this conversation isn't over, Morgan." "Actually, it is," I replied. "I'll help you get settled somewhere temporarily, as I offered. Beyond that, we have nothing more to discuss until you're ready to treat me with basic respect." As they grudgingly gathered their belongings, another car pulled up. It was Mark from my finance team, stopping by with the files I'd asked for when I called in that morning. "Perfect timing," Rachel muttered. "The more witnesses, the better." The next hour was tense but controlled as Mom and Jason packed their things under the watchful eyes of my impromptu support system. Rachel helped me book and pay for one night at the nearby hotel, making it clear that any extensions would be their responsibility. When the rideshare I'd called arrived, Mom paused at the door for one last attempt. "You'll regret this, Morgan. When you have nobody left, you'll remember who your real family is." I looked at Rachel, who had dropped everything to come support me at Mr. Patterson, who had recognized a neighbor in distress and stepped in to help, and at Mark, who was confused but concerned enough to stay until my unwanted guests had departed. "I already know who my real family is, Mom," I said softly. "They're the people who respect me, support me without conditions, and love me without trying to exploit me." Her face hardened as she realized her usual tactics had failed. "This isn't over," she warned as she walked to the car. "Yes, it is," I replied, closing the door firmly behind them. Only after their car had disappeared down the street did I allow myself to collapse onto the couch, the adrenaline of the confrontation leaving me shaking and exhausted. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, sitting beside me. "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." As the shock wore off, I discovered several items missing. A pair of diamond earrings my college roommates had given me as a graduation gift, my grandmother's bracelet, and oddly, my backup credit card that I kept in my desk drawer for emergencies. A quick check online showed they had already used it for a shopping spree before I'd even discovered it was gone. The violation stung, but in a strange way, it also provided clarity. Their actions had proven exactly who they were, and justified my decision to enforce boundaries. For perhaps the first time, I felt no guilt about standing up to them, only relief that they were gone and determination to keep them from causing further damage to my life. The week following my family's dramatic departure was a tsunami of harassment and manipulation tactics. My phone buzzed constantly, with texts and calls from both Mom and Jason, cycling predictably between threats, guilt trips, and occasional pathetic attempts at apology that always circled back to, "But if you'd just help us, like we asked." I blocked their numbers after the first day, but they simply began using other phones to reach me. At first, I tried responding with brief, factual messages reiterating my boundaries, but it quickly became clear that any engagement only fueled their persistence. The flying monkeys arrived next, distant relatives and hometown acquaintances I barely remembered, all calling to tell me how concerned they were about my abandonment of my poor mother and struggling brother. Each conversation followed the same script. They'd heard I was doing well financially, an understatement of what Mom had likely told them, and couldn't understand why I wouldn't help my family just a little. Certainly not how Mom had framed her demands. By midweek, my mother had taken to social media, posting tearful updates about her ungrateful daughter who had changed with success and forgotten where she came from. She carefully crafted her narrative to make me the villain without stating any specific details that could be proven false. The vagueness made it more effective, allowing people to fill in the blanks with their own assumptions. Jason took a more direct approach, sending me a text from a new number threatening to stop by my workplace to introduce himself to my colleagues. The implied disruption was clear, and though I wanted to believe it was just another empty threat, I couldn't take the risk. "I need to talk to you about a personal situation that might impact work," I told my manager, Diane, during our weekly one-on-one. I rarely discussed my personal life at work, so her concern was immediate. "What's going on, Morgan? Are you okay?" she asked, closing her office door to give us privacy. I gave her the condensed version. Estranged family members who had shown up demanding money, made threats when refused, and might attempt to cause problems at the office. I didn't share the childhood history or emotional details, but I provided enough context that she understood the severity. "That's completely unacceptable," Diane said firmly. "I'll alert security right away. If anyone tries to see you without an appointment, they won't get past the lobby." Her immediate support without judgment was overwhelming in the best way. For so long, I'd kept my family history separate from my professional life, afraid that the dysfunction would somehow reflect poorly on me. Instead, I was met with compassion and practical assistance. I took 3 days off to handle the practical aspects of protecting myself. I changed the locks on my house, installed a video doorbell and security system, and met with my bank to report the credit card theft and secure my accounts with additional verification measures. The emotional processing was harder. Despite knowing intellectually that I'd done nothing wrong, the lifetime of conditioning to feel responsible for my mother and brother's happiness was difficult to overcome. Each angry message or manipulative plea triggered waves of guilt, doubt, and grief. "What you're feeling is normal," Dr. Chen, my therapist, assured me during an emergency session I'd scheduled. "You're grieving the family you deserved to have but never did." "But they're not dead," I pointed out. "They're very much alive and making their presence known. Grief isn't just about death," she explained gently. "It's about loss. You're losing the hope that they might someday become the mother and brother you needed. You're letting go of the fantasy that if you just try hard enough, sacrifice enough, they'll finally love you the way you deserve to be loved." Those words hit me like a physical blow. She was right. Beneath all the practical concerns about harassment and security, I was mourning the death of a hope I'd carried since childhood. The hope that somewhere beneath my mother's manipulation and my brother's entitlement, there was genuine love that would eventually overcome their dysfunction. "The guilt you feel isn't because you've done something wrong," Dr. Chen continued. "It's because they installed those buttons in you from childhood, programmed to respond to certain triggers. We can work on disconnecting those buttons so their tactics lose power." I left that session with homework to write down every guilt-inducing message I received and identify the specific manipulation tactic being used. The exercise helped me see the patterns objectively, separating emotional response from rational analysis. While I was making progress emotionally, the practical harassment continued to escalate. Jason did indeed show up at my office building. Though security prevented him from reaching my floor, he created such a scene in the lobby that they had to call the police, who escorted him from the property with a warning. Mom took a different approach, somehow obtaining contact information for several of my friends and colleagues. Rachel forwarded me the melodramatic email she'd received, full of out-of-context half-truths and outright lies about my childhood and current situation. "Your friend Morgan has been going through some mental health issues," the email began, positioning Mom as the concerned parent rather than the exploitative manipulator she truly was. It went on to suggest that my paranoia and persecution complex were causing me to push away my loving family who only wanted to help during my success. Rachel's response had been succinct. "I've known Morgan for over a decade. I know exactly who she is and exactly who you are. Do not contact me again." The most concerning development came when anonymous negative reviews began appearing on my LinkedIn profile and professional websites where I was listed. Though they were removed quickly for violating terms of service, the message was clear. My family was willing to attack my professional reputation to punish me for refusing their demands. Meeting with a lawyer felt like an extreme step, but by the end of that tumultuous week, it was clearly necessary. Attorney Sarah Martinez specialized in harassment cases and listened carefully as I detailed the escalating situation. Unfortunately, this pattern is more common than you might think, she told me. Family financial exploitation often follows this exact trajectory: demands, then guilt, then social pressure, and finally attacks on reputation or livelihood when other methods fail. She helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter, documenting the specific behaviors that constituted harassment and the potential legal consequences if they continued. We also discussed the process for filing a restraining order if necessary, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Document everything, she advised. Every call, text, social media post, every instance of contact through third parties. If they violate the cease and desist, that documentation will be crucial for enforcement. As I left her office with the formal letter ready to be sent via certified mail, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The legal action represented a line crossed that could never be uncrossed, a formal acknowledgement that my relationship with my mother and brother had deteriorated beyond repair. Yet there was also freedom in that acknowledgement. The freedom to finally protect myself without ambivalence or guilt. "You're doing the right thing," Rachel reassured me over dinner that night. "This isn't about punishing them. It's about protecting yourself." "I know," I agreed, finding that I actually believed it. For the first time, I'm putting myself first without feeling guilty about it. That's progress, right? "That's not just progress," she smiled, raising her glass in a toast. "That's a breakthrough." 3 months after the dramatic confrontation in my living room, life had reached a new equilibrium. The certified cease and desist letter had made an impact. The direct harassment had stopped almost immediately, though I occasionally heard about passive-aggressive social media posts through mutual acquaintances. Jason had crossed a final line by showing up at my workplace, resulting in a formal restraining order that prohibited him from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or my office. The court hearing had been tense but mercifully brief, his past behavior providing ample evidence for the judge to rule in my favor. I had changed my phone number, blocked them on all social platforms, and created a new email address for personal communications, sharing it only with trusted friends. My old email remained active but filtered, automatically sending messages from my family or their known associates to a folder I checked only occasionally with my therapist's support. The practical protections had given me space to focus on rebuilding and strengthening other aspects of my life. Without the constant drain of guilt and obligation, I found myself with emotional energy to invest in relationships that actually nourished me. Movie night at my place became a weekly tradition, with Rachel and a small group of friends gathering for comfort food and conversation that often lasted late into the night. These were people who celebrated my successes without envy, offered support without keeping score, and respected my boundaries without question. The very definition of chosen family. My relationship with Lisa, my mentor from early in my career, deepened as well. At 62, she had navigated her own complex family dynamics while building an impressive career in finance. Our monthly lunches evolved from professional development to deeper discussions about life, resilience, and finding peace with difficult family histories. "I wish I'd had someone to tell me at your age what I'm telling you now," she said during one particularly meaningful conversation. "That it's okay to love difficult family members from a distance. That protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary." Professionally, I channeled my newfound emotional clarity into my work. The project I'd been hesitant to volunteer for, leading a cross-functional team to redesign our company's financial planning process, now seemed like an exciting challenge rather than an overwhelming burden. Without the constant background anxiety about potential family crises, I could focus my full attention on the complex problems that had drawn me to my field in the first place. My team noticed the difference. "You seem lighter somehow," commented James, a senior analyst who'd worked with me for years, more confident in your decisions. He was right. The constant second-guessing instilled by years of maternal criticism had diminished. I still sought input and considered multiple perspectives, but the paralyzing fear of making the wrong choice, of somehow failing and proving my mother right about my inadequacy, had faded. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my healing process. Dr. Chen helped me recognize and counteract the deeply ingrained patterns of people-pleasing and excessive responsibility that had been programmed into me from childhood. "Notice how you apologized just now for being 5 minutes late," she pointed out during one session. "Even though you called ahead, even though I assured you it was fine, even though being delayed by a work emergency is completely reasonable." That's the hypervigilance speaking. The part of you that was trained to believe any small mistake would result in withdrawal of love or approval. These insights helped me identify similar patterns in other relationships. I became more aware of when I was agreeing to things I didn't want to do out of fear of disappointing others, or when I was taking on responsibilities that weren't mine to shoulder. Practice in setting boundaries in small, low-stakes situations built my confidence for maintaining them in more challenging contexts. I learned that most healthy people respected clear boundaries, and those who didn't were revealing important information about themselves and the relationship. 6 months after the confrontation, my newfound strength was tested when a letter arrived from my mother. Unlike her previous communications filled with demands and accusations, this one claimed she had been diagnosed with breast cancer and needed my support. The letter hit all the emotional triggers: fear, guilt, obligation, and my first instinct was to call immediately. Instead, I brought the letter to my next therapy session. Dr. Chen helped me examine my reaction and consider appropriate responses that maintained my boundaries while acknowledging my genuine concern. "If this is true, I'm sorry she's going through that," I told Dr. Chen. "But I also know she's used fake health scares in the past to manipulate me and others." Together, we crafted a response that was compassionate but firm. I expressed sympathy for her diagnosis and provided information about cancer support resources in her area. But I maintained the boundaries regarding financial support and direct involvement in her care. I later discovered through a distant cousin that while my mother had indeed had a cancer scare, it had turned out to be a benign cyst that required no treatment, information conveniently omitted from her letter to me. The manipulation attempt confirmed that my cautious response had been appropriate. By the holiday season, I had established a new relationship pattern with my mother. Limited, structured contact on my terms. Our monthly brief phone calls had clear beginning and end times, and I ended the call immediately if she violated my clearly stated boundaries around certain topics. Jason and I had no contact by mutual choice. He had moved to Arizona for a job opportunity, removing the immediate threat of his presence in my life. According to mutual acquaintances, he still occasionally complained about his rich sister, who wouldn't help him out, but the act of harassment had ceased. For the first time in my adult life, I experienced a holiday season without the weight of guilt and obligation. Instead of forcing myself through tense family gatherings characterized by walking on eggshells and emotional manipulation, I created new traditions with my chosen family. Rachel and her husband hosted Thanksgiving, where we all contributed our favorite dishes and spent the evening playing board games and laughing. For Christmas, I organized a trip to a mountain cabin with a small group of close friends, where we hiked during the day and gathered around the fireplace in the evenings, sharing stories and dreams for the coming year. This is what holidays should feel like, I realized as I looked around at the genuine warmth and connection surrounding me. Not performances of familial harmony hiding dysfunction, but authentic celebrations with people who truly cared for each other. The path hadn't been easy or straight. There were still difficult days when grief would catch me unexpectedly. Mourning the mother I'd needed but never had. The brother who might have been a friend in a different reality. But those moments no longer derailed me completely. I had learned to acknowledge the sadness without letting it define me or my choices. A year after that fateful doorbell ring that had set everything in motion, I sat in my living room, now truly my sanctuary again, reflecting on how much had changed. The internal transformation had been even more significant than the external circumstances. I had finally internalized a truth that had eluded me for decades. I deserved relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care, not exploitation and conditional approval. My mother had been partly right in her parting shot. Family was indeed important, but not the narrow definition she'd weaponized against me. My true family was the one I'd built through authentic connections and mutual support. And that family, chosen day by day through acts of love and respect, had proven stronger and more nurturing than biological ties, distorted by exploitation and control. Sitting in my garden on a rare, sunny Seattle afternoon, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that changed everything, I reflected on the journey of the past 12 months. The tulips I'd planted in the fall were blooming in vibrant reds and yellows, a visual reminder that sometimes painful cutting away is necessary for new growth. In the months since establishing firm boundaries with my family, I'd experienced a profound internal shift that those closest to me had noticed even before I fully recognized it myself. "You laugh more easily now," Rachel observed during our weekly coffee date. "And you don't constantly check your phone with that worried look anymore." She was right. The hypervigilance that had been my constant companion for decades had gradually eased. I no longer jumped when my phone rang or felt that reflexive flutter of anxiety when checking my email. The perpetual waiting for the next crisis, the next demand, the next emotional ambush. It had faded to a faint echo rather than a constant roar. The limited contact arrangement with my mother had stabilized into a predictable pattern. Our monthly calls lasted exactly 30 minutes, during which she shared local news and I provided general updates about my work and activities. The conversations remained superficial, but they were also free from the manipulation tactics that had characterized our interactions for years. "How are you doing with the holidays coming up?" Dr. Chen asked during a session in early November, knowing this would be my second year creating new traditions. "Actually, I'm looking forward to them," I realized as I said it. "Last year felt like an experiment. Can I really do this differently? This year feels like a choice I'm making confidently." We had worked extensively on recognizing and counteracting the guilt that had driven so many of my decisions. I'd learned to distinguish between healthy remorse for actual wrongdoing and the manufactured guilt installed by years of manipulation. "I still have moments when I question whether I'm being too harsh," I admitted, "especially with Mom. But then I remind myself that maintaining boundaries isn't punishment, it's protection. And protecting yourself isn't selfish," Dr. Chen added, echoing what had become a mantra in our sessions. "It's necessary," I finished. "I know that now, intellectually and emotionally." That integration of head and heart knowledge had been perhaps the most significant milestone in my healing journey. I no longer just conceptually understood that I deserved better treatment. I felt it as a bone-deep truth that guided my choices and relationships. The ripple effects of this internal shift had touched every area of my life. Professionally, I had taken on leadership of a major initiative to streamline our company's financial systems, a project that would have overwhelmed me a year earlier, when so much of my emotional energy was consumed by family drama. "The board was impressed with your presentation," my director told me after I'd presented our quarterly results. "Your confidence came through clearly." That confidence had extended to my personal relationships as well. I'd begun dating again after a long hiatus, approaching potential partnerships with a clearer sense of what healthy connection looked like. When I noticed red flags, a dismissive comment, a small boundary ignored, I no longer rationalized or minimized them. Instead, I trusted my instincts and addressed concerns directly, or, if necessary, stepped away. My experience had also inspired me to reach out to others in similar situations. I'd begun mentoring Zoe, a younger colleague from a challenging family background who was struggling to establish professional boundaries. Our weekly coffee meetings became a space where she could voice her doubts and fears to someone who truly understood. "How did you know when it was okay to prioritize yourself?" she asked during one of our conversations. "I still feel so guilty whenever I say no to my parents, even when their requests are unreasonable." I shared my own journey without prescribing specific actions, recognizing that each person's path to healthy boundaries would look different. But the core message remained consistent. You deserve relationships that build you up rather than drain you. And sometimes, the most compassionate choice, for yourself and ultimately for others, is to set limits on behaviors that harm. These mentoring relationships had led me to volunteer with a youth organization that supported first-generation college students navigating the challenging terrain between their aspirations and their family expectations. The resilience and determination of these young people reminded me of my own journey and reinforced my belief that breaking dysfunctional cycles was both possible and profoundly worthwhile. Perhaps most meaningful was establishing a small scholarship for students with limited family support. The Morgan Adams Resilience Scholarship provided not just financial assistance, but also mentorship and community to students who, like me, were charting paths without the safety net many of their peers took for granted. "You've created something beautiful from a painful experience," Lisa commented when I told her about the scholarship. "That's true transformation." The scholarship reminded me that while we can't choose the families we're born into, we can choose how we respond to that inheritance. Whether we perpetuate patterns or disrupt them, whether we remain defined by our wounds or use them as the foundation for something healing and constructive. Even my relationship with Jason had found a kind of resolution, though not in the way I might once have hoped. After moving to Arizona, he had apparently done some reflection of his own. 6 months after our confrontation, he sent a brief email. "I'm not ready for a real conversation yet, and maybe I never will be. But I want you to know I'm getting help for some of my issues. I realize now that the way we grew up wasn't normal, and I've been carrying some messed up expectations because of it. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know." I had responded with equal brevity, wishing him well in his journey without opening the door to resuming our previous dynamics. It wasn't reconciliation in the traditional sense, but it was an acknowledgement of truth, and that felt like its own kind of progress. As for my mother, I had come to accept that she might never change in the ways I had once desperately hoped. The patterns were too deeply ingrained, the self-awareness too limited. But I had changed, and that had transformed the relationship in the only way possible, by refusing to participate in the dynamics that had caused so much harm. Love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be used or diminished, Dr. Chen had told me in one of our early sessions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for the other person, is to stop enabling destructive patterns. A year into this journey, I could see the wisdom in those words with painful clarity. My mother's manipulative behaviors had persisted because they worked, until I finally refused to let them work anymore. In setting boundaries, I had not only protected myself, but also removed the incentive for toxic behavior. Whether she would choose healthier ways of relating remained her decision, but I no longer bore responsibility for it. The most profound lesson of this year had been learning to distinguish between actual family and mere biological connection. True family, whether related by blood or choice, was characterized by mutual respect, genuine care, and the freedom to be authentically yourself. It built you up rather than diminished you, celebrated your success rather than resented it, and loved you for who you were rather than what you could provide. I had found that true family in the friends who showed up without being asked, in mentors who shared wisdom without demanding compliance, in a community built on genuine connection rather than obligation, and in doing so, I had finally freed myself from the exhausting pursuit of approval from people incapable of giving it. If you're watching this and my story resonates with your own experience, please know you're not alone. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things many of us will ever do, but it's also one of the most important acts of self-care possible. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family boundaries in the comments below. What difficult boundaries have you had to establish in your own life? And how did you find the strength to maintain them? Your stories might help someone else feeling trapped in similar patterns. Before you go, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being. Remember, you deserve relationships that honor your worth. And sometimes, creating those relationships means having the courage to walk away from those that don't. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Until next time, take good care of yourself, because you absolutely deserve it.